So the next section of our conversation is a conversation with some of the partners in this world, which is scheme and payment and training and capacity strengthening. And I wanted to introduce, therefore, in a conversation, quite a few of the people who think a lot every day about instant payments and schemes in different ways. David, I wanted to start the conversation with you and really learn a little bit about your journey into financial inclusion and instant payments and the origins of your organization, DFI, Digital Frontiers Institute. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, because I don't think our community will know too much.
Hi, Desian. Thank you. And good morning and good afternoon to the community. It's great to be here, and we appreciate your invitation to join you. I must tell you, Desian, I'm afraid I'm not in that exclusive club that thinks about instant payments every day in the last 6 months, because I've actually been on a sabbatical. And I'm
Very
happy
nice.
to say that I'm ready to be refreshed in that thinking of instant payments. But to connect the dots in terms of your request, my involvement in financial inclusion goes back a very long way, probably some 25, 30 years, to involvement in affordable housing finance originally, and then in forms of banking, originally in Africa. And then when I moved here to the States, to Boston, where I live about 20 years ago, that led to a wider journey, consulting around inclusive digital finance, and more recently focusing on inclusive fintech. So that's been a part of my journey. The part that's perhaps most relevant to the conversation today, though, is the journey that started 6 years ago with the formation of Digital Frontiers with two co-founders, Gavin Krugel and Ignacio Mas. And that was really started, Leslie, around a vision that said, there seems to be lots of money out there for digital finance in different forms. There's even quite a lot of software, it may be proprietary, and that's an issue you're tackling here, but the shortage seemed to be human capability, whether on the public side or the private side. And so we set up Digital Frontiers in 2015 as a capacity building platform. An ed tech play is the way you would name it now, because at the center of it was the online platform. But the vision of capacity building was so much more than that. And so for the last 6 years, we've been on a journey in discovering what forms of pedagogy work in equipping people to be more effective professionals in the area of digital finance. And the area of instant payments is a particular set of that in which we've been working. And I know we'll talk some more.
So tell me a bit the kind of people that benefit from DFI's showcase.
Well, our main beneficiaries, target beneficiaries, are professionals, working people in emerging markets predominantly, although we've attracted students from 160 countries to date, but the majority have tended to be people from sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. That I think is something like 60 to 70% of our student numbers so far. What do they look like? Well, more than 50% come from private sector organizations, and those vary widely. Banks certainly, but telcos, switches, consultancies, a whole range of different firms in that category. Further 30% come from the public sector, broadly defined, of which financial regulators make up an important part. They're very much a recognized target constituency that we seek to serve, and we have particular programs that serve them. And then the balance, the 20%, come from what we'd call the development sector. So people involved in different ways with multilateral, bilateral institutions, foundations, and so on, who take an interest in this space. So that's the profile that we've had so far of the students who we hope benefit.
Fantastic. And what kind of things do you cover in your courses?
Well, the original program that we started is called the Certified Digital Finance Practitioner, CDFP, to add more acronym to the acronym soup that already exists out there. And the reason for starting that as a program was we looked around and we saw in many of the countries in which I was working and others were working, we saw institutes of bankers that existed. But in many ways, they lived in, I hate to say it, but the early part of the 20th century, not even the late part, in terms of what they could offer to their members as bankers. And at the same time, in many countries alongside the banking sector, were springing up these very vibrant new forms of financial service provider. And so the CDFP program, as our core offering and our original offering, really was set up to provide a kind of alternative to a typical Institute of Bankers qualification, because it's not about banking as defined. It was about when you break those boundaries and you focus on digital finance, the functional forms are less important, or rather the institutional forms are less important than the functional forms. And so that course is a bundle of courses, some required ones that introduce students to things going on around the world in different places, and then some specialist electives. And then they do a capstone project. And we're seeing more and more people now coming through this program. And, Leslie, we're proud to see the CDFP acronym appear on people's LinkedIn profiles and also in job searches,
yeah.
which is ultimately the test, right? If this helps people get better jobs.
I've seen it, and I've actually seen it in some of our Mojo community members have been through your program as well, which is really, really interesting to see the overlap between the two as well. So what is your vision for DFI and where are you headed to next?
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. And so we started within digital finance, and that remains our core. And we have programs, one in particular we could talk more about. I have a colleague and colleagues here who can focus on that in a moment. But our vision was always to use the platform and the approach to speak more widely about things digital. So we have things going with health professionals right now for the WHO, working on a gender change makers program, which goes beyond digital finance, but is working in other areas where this pedagogy works. And so just to be clear, our vision is for seeing an extension of the pedagogy, which is an online instructional form that's synchronous and asynchronous, both, combined with induction into physical communities of practice. And we've come to see how that hybrid, if you like, of the online together with the community of practice is such an essential part of being a professional in the world today. It's not only about watching YouTube videos or our videos for that matter, or anyone else's. It really is about the networking and the reinforcement that comes from being part of a body of people who are on a professional journey together. And so our vision would be to see an extension of that into more and more areas. We're working on a program around digital economy right now, which is linked to digital finance and payments. Obviously, that's a key enabler, but it's so much more than that. And that's a fascinating extension. So that would be our vision looking forward.
And you actually have a very interesting extension that I took the course myself about a year and a half ago, your identity course, because
yes.
Payments and identity are so intertwined with each other as well. It was fascinating and it was really hard work. And I'm still part of the community, so I really hear what you're saying there indeed. So thanks, David. Elizabeth, I wanted to also find out about Glenbrook's work and what you've been doing over the years. We first met many moons ago as part of level 1 work and the boot camps that you do. So I wanted to find out a bit more about what Glenbrook are doing in this industry.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to share more because some of the names I see on the side have certainly intersected with these level 1 boot camps. Others haven't had that opportunity, but Glenbrook payment consulting strategy firm, and we had the, I think, good fortune and challenge to work with the Gates Foundation as the sort of framework and the principles were being developed, and feel a lot of ownership in making that a success. And we have really level 1 is also on a journey, right? It's not static, even though there are core principles. It also needs to continue to add to its knowledge base, both through engaging more communities with boot camps, but also other, if you will, deep dive research, which is available to the community. I want to be sure and speak to some of those in case people are interested. But the boot camps that the Gates Foundation has cultivated and makes available, generally they're made available on a national payment enablement basis. So, for example, there's a country, a central bank that's really interested in developing a new instant payment system and making it inclusive. And it's bringing all the stakeholders together in many of the ways that I think DFI does, but bring them into the room at the same time and talk about this journey together. What's involved in creating this? And in some ways, you might think of the level 1 boot camp as an unofficial kickoff of a project implementation, right? Bringing everyone together and getting them at least aligned on where we're going. They may not all agree on all the steps along the way, right? Because we have public sector, private sector, often very competing visions of where this goes. But it begins that dialogue and sort of traction around where it's going. And then if I could just also speak about the complementary activities that, level 1 needs to keep up with what the community is doing. And it also has, some deep dive researches available on payment scheme governance, right? We've learned that, if you will, technology is a key, but only one big part of an inclusive payment system. So there's payment scheme governance best practices and sort of view of what's going on around the world. There's also QR codes. We also have, I think many of you have seen in the Mojaloop community, a kind of generic rule set, right? That's available for implementers. And finally, I'll just note that one of the newest developments underway is really helping to look at the sort of cost, the cost benefit analysis of what a payment system is enabling. And we're working with the Product Council to create a tool that will be available in the coming months to really compare across different costs of payment systems. So buy, build, open source, or even modules there, right? Let's look at it on a modular basis because it's not always one completely or the other. Yeah. Thanks, Leslie Ann.
And I think what's fantastic about working with entities like DFI, and we're going to talk about IIPS next, and Glenbrook, is that magic can happen when business and tech folk come together, because there's so many things to think about, both from a commercial space, but from a governance space and from a technical space. Everyone's got excellence to chase. And then there's the operational side of things. Mm-hmm. And it takes an army. It takes an army to actually get things going in market. I think you've been a big part of the conversation over in Tanzania as well, Glenbrook. I think Elizabeth is part of that whole kind of conversation. So this is fundamentally for me what the partner network is about. We need technical experts, but we also need those who facilitate good conversations, get schemes thinking about level 1 principles, but also maybe even level 2 principles. Like how do you bring the level 1 alive? Maybe it's discovery, agreement, transfer, and thinking through APIs and protocols as part of that conversation, which is, I think, what's really beautiful about what's going on at Iips Certification. Javier, I wanted you to give us an overview. What is this Iips Certification thing, and what's it like?
Definitely.
Tell me some more.
I will be happy to do so. Let me just, before jumping on that, Leslie, and let me just take in one of the things that Elizabeth and David has mentioning, because I think it's very important. When they were talking about capacity strengthening, and this idea that it's not too much about transmitting knowledge, it's more like convening the professional community, that I think that is what Mojaloop is doing and is what we are trying to do at DFI. It's a community, in our case, is made of students, faculty, experts in the field, but the idea is to grow together and develop by sharing what the students they know, and by sharing together these new ideas. It's like a very dynamic learning experience. And we hope that is lasting because once the classes are over, the idea is that the network, the community continues. That's what the spirit behind DFI, as David was explaining, and that's what we are trying to do in the IIPS program in a more specific way for the.
Let's unpack. let's unpack it a little bit because I don't know how many of our audience are aware of IIPS and even what it stands for and what you're doing there. So I guess go back to kind of talk about IIPS from its first principles and where it came about.
Excellent. Let me share very quickly my screen, because I think that will be helpful. So I don't want to take too much time, but I'm going to give my 60-second elevator pitch on IIPS. So maybe it's not 60 seconds, but I will try to make it close to that. No, and I'm here today hoping that some of you attending will soon be IIPS students starting out your journey towards the Iips certificate. Iips meaning Instant and Inclusive Payment Systems. As you know, continuing to learn and grow as professionals and building your network are worthwhile investment of time, but it's time at the end of the day, and how you spend it, especially in a field like IIPS, which is evolving very, very quickly. I think that we need to have a clear path. No? And the IIPS program, what it's trying to offer is a clear path to a professional certification that comes along with a vibrant community, as we were discussing, this professional community of people working in the payments space. And the idea is that we together build opportunities for further development on that. So the idea is that you start here with the IIPS Foundations course. It's like an introductory course on payments with touch on a lot of the principles of level 1 that Elizabeth was discussing. And the idea is it's totally self-paced. It's 100% online. And so you can do it at your own pace, at your own time. So, and once you are ready and you feel that you are well prepared, the next steps is that you take the foundation exam. It's like a 1 hour online multiple choice exam that qualifies you for advanced IIPS courses that are much more specialized. No, now you can choose regulation, technology, business, and operations. So which course helps you to reach your goal? No, so you decide, and then you can choose. No, these are again online courses, 6 weeks each, with webinars and non-real-time elements, and they fit in a very busy schedule that most of our students have. No, so that's a little bit the journey, and finally, we have the IIPS Capstone seminar, which brings all the candidates together from across many countries for an in-depth exploration of challenges and solutions in IIPS, and leads to the final certificate of the program. That's the path. You can start the program anytime. Today you can go to the web, you can look a little bit more the information there, but more or less that's the path that we have built for the IIPS program. Thank you, Leslie.
So I think you've chosen a really interesting 6 weeks online synchronous learning format. And I actually really enjoyed when I joined this advanced program about a year ago to learn about your model village and the country that you'd brought, and you're actually bringing these different actors, the business and technology actors together all around the same challenge, which was to get instant payments going in your model country.
Yeah, the idea is try to make the experience also engaging for students. It's trying to not just, again, it's not about transmitting the knowledge. There are already papers, there are a lot of that is there. So we want to go beyond that, and also put a lot of emphasis on creating the experience, for making things happen, with the calls with the students, with bringing experts, with trying to also look for some fun elements, that make the experience a little bit also more practical. And that's where we had that idea of bringing like a fictional country that also gives us more flexibility in terms of creating some of these assignments.
Super. And so I wanted to introduce Anjeza to the conversation as well. Anjeza, you are a graduate of this program, and I wanted you to just introduce yourself briefly and tell us a little bit who you are and why you chose to do this.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. So my name is Xavier, and actually I work as an independent consultant. So provide technical assistance to central banks on payment systems and also on accounting issues. Currently working for the IMF and previously working for the World Bank. For 12 years, I've been working at the Bank of Albania, where I was a director for payment systems, accounting, and finance department. So I found this opportunity to participate in the Iips course is very interesting because it actually is linked with my current work and also with my background as a regulator. And that's why that was the main purpose for registering first in the regulatory course for the implementation of instant inclusive payment systems. But actually what really I found fascinating was that because every day we'll read in the literature and also different documents and news from other central banks, speaking a lot about fast payments, instant payments. But what actually was really interesting to me was the introduction of the word inclusive in the name of the course. So that made me think, what is this course about? And then when we went deeper to that, I understand that it's more about, let's say, bringing institutions together in one platform, not just banks, but also non-banking services providers, including other payment service providers. And especially from the context of a very small country, like it is my country, Albania, but other countries, well, financial inclusion is really low. That is really helpful because create possibilities for non-bank players and their clients to interoperate with other clients of banks or non-banks, but also with businesses, small merchants, and so on. So that's why I found it very interesting. And going deeper into the course, I understood that so the way how the course was actually organized was very interactive and was very, very helpful because it started with an overview of laws and regulations needed to be probably changed or implemented in order to establish an IPS, the instant and inclusive payment system. But also it went through the international principles, also explained case studies about different countries, but also made clear the corporate trade-offs between the policy trade-offs, such as, for example, risks from the perspective of regulator, but also innovations from the perspective of the market, and how these two link together and to find a mechanism how this could cooperate together for a successful implementation. The other thing I found very, very helpful in the course was also because it was designed for different backgrounds. So even though it was much easier for me, because given my regulatory background to understand the concept, but speaking from the perspective of a person who is in its initial phases, so the basics is already there. So that's helpful for this kind of, let's say, categories as well. So this was, let's say, a general overview of my feedback of the course, which actually I'm finding really helpful. And currently I'm actually following the Capstone seminar, which is really interesting. And now we're in the final phase of it. So let's see how the final pitch will go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andresa. I'm curious if you came across the Modulip family in that conversation, because I know that actually the concept of open source is talked about in the technology module, but I know you were in the other module.
Yes, it was absolutely. And we're looking at it even in the Capstone seminar. So one was part of the reading documents that we went through.
Fantastic. And actually, one of the IIPS tutors is part of the Modulip conversation. Steve, are you in the room today?
Yeah.
There he is.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Steve, I thought it would be really interesting to hear your perspective on IIPS through the lens of someone who spent a lot of time with Modulip.
I must disclose,
Sure.
I chatted David Porteous to say how happy I am to see him. We worked with David for a very long time when we were facilitating the uptake of M-Pesa and mobile payments in Africa. And what I liked, because I was part and parcel of the designing team, can see Xavier there, and we worked together with you and the team. We were really looking for a course that will build capacity. This word capacity, David repeated, is very, very important, and especially the capacity of the regulators to facilitate innovation. I could repeat that 1,000 times. Innovations and technology have come to change the way the world has dealt with various problems. Financial inclusion is actually not the end game. Financial inclusion is actually about dealing with poverty. And therefore, when we looked at David, thank you for being fantastic in seeing this opportunity. Many a regulator or many a policymaker has a challenge facilitating innovations. And that is why we participated in this preparation of this course. Leslie, I may want to hear what are the weaknesses that we left out there so that we can improve on them, because we are capacity builders and we believe that if it is going to change the regulators and the policymakers, we will get a better world. Good afternoon, good morning, and thank you very much for this excellent course and these facilities that we are meeting here. Thank you again. Elizabeth, also, I remember we are working together on other issues. And all of us, yeah, we are a community. Thank you.
So for the community to realize what happened there, we have two Stevens, and Stephen Mwara just spoke. Stephen's a regulator or was part of the regulator family in Kenya when we launched M-Pesa back in 2005. And he's been obviously a big part of the conversation of financial inclusion and mobile money and the role of non-banks in the story. So thank you, Stephen, for that. Our second Steve is Steve Haley, who's currently on the spotlight. He's also part of the Iips Certification kind of advisory group and works in the technical track to talk a little bit about the role of open source as a new concept into the role of instant payments, because Mojaloop as a digital public good exists. Steve, I'd love some of your insights as well.
Sure, and I mean, always pleasure to hear from Stephen. We that happens to us quite often. So I'll just say, I mean, it's great to see Javier again. This course has been amazing. I'll just say, after going through it and going through as one of the tutors, every program that we are a part of, we are, as far as Modusbox is concerned, we are going to make participation in IIPS, the tech track at least, a prerequisite for anybody who is going to participate in a project with us. The students that come out at the other end are completely prepared to participate in projects with us. And so we're actually looking at a variety of things. We're especially in Asia, where I'm focused, of all of our projects actually having all participants go through this project. I can say that I think we're going to hear more about our Myanmar project a couple of times over the next couple of days. After the struggles we've gone through over the past year, we are really wishing that this was available a year ago, because getting all of the stakeholders aligned, getting everyone to understand what was they were coming there to do would have been incredible. The tie-ins to the Mojaloop training program are very clear as well. So this is a much better place to start. I think a lot of the participants we've had in the Mojaloop training program have come back saying, great, but there was a few foundations I wish I'd have understood before digging deep into what Mojaloop is. And the IIPS course is exactly that. We couldn't have imagined doing it better. And I would say that I think the course lays out a very nice comparison of what the different options are, and allows students the opportunity to discuss whether open source is right for them in a way that is not pushing them in that direction. But I'm very happy with the fact that it at least acknowledges that it's a very valid option for them. And I think we had some very good discussions about pro and con open source in the last IIPS session, IIPS Tech Track, where a lot of people already had exposure to Mojaloop, and a lot more people got exposure to Mojaloop. Some people were able to voice their concerns, and some people were able to counter those concerns. So it was a great forum for having that open source debate among actual implementers. So just want to thank Javier for having that course and letting me be a part of it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
And that's literally saying out loud the role of tech and business working together, and us figuring out, that actually Mojaloop will be a solution for some markets, but there's a lot of thinking to be done. As Lucy said in the Digital Public Goods Alliance presentation, there's a lot of thinking to be done to go, what's the difference between going open source and what's the difference between just buying a proprietary platform from a vendor? So it's an incredibly useful forum for people to learn in the context of overall IIPS thinking. So reinforce exactly what Steve said. I enjoyed the course very much myself as well. From the panelists, anything that you would like to say to the rest of the Moduloop folk before we then open up to questions and see who else is around and who else might like to kind of contribute to the conversation?
Maybe I can add one thing that sounds like it's very relevant to the community here's conversation that I heard in the breakout room. It's this question of certification and what's the value of certification? There was a conversation around that, just to share our experience. So we are a training institute, a capacity building institute. We certify our programs, as you heard Xavier said, we certify IIPS, but that's just us. We've had a lot of working through the value of having co-certification with other partners. So for example, on our core program, the CDFP, the Certified Digital Finance Practitioner, that's co-certified with a university, the Fletcher School at Tufts University here in Greater Boston. And we found that for a lot of our students, that really matters. It really helps to have a university as a certifying partner. And the reason is simple. It's because HR processes, especially in the public sector, but not only in the public sector, recognize university-linked accreditations. They don't recognize independent ones. And so I share that because as we think about what certification looks like and what forms you might be considering in the Moduloop community, I think it's interesting to reflect on where people see value, how that value is created and how it's sustained over time. And for us, it's an ongoing journey. We don't have everything certified by the university, but it has been an important part of our journey that is available.
Thank you. And I think that resonates with what I've experienced over the years, that people value the qualification. And for us, certainly in the community, it's been, as Steve said, useful to have those who have a really good grounding in IIPS, the business side as well as the technology. So yeah, very much so. So I wanted to. Anyone else want to add any comments before I open to the rest of the community and see who wants to kind of contribute?
If I could just add one thing, Leslie Ann, that I think, over the past few years, there's been this tremendous focus on sort of, if you will, getting started, right? And there's so much involved in that. And it's its own end-to-end journey. But there's an important aspect of what happens in the sort of care and feeding of this after you get it implemented and go live. And I think that's where a lot of our thinking is focusing on now, right? So how do we keep the vision alive and keep the principles in action through how we operate a platform, the scheme, rules, who participates, how is it inclusive? And so I think that it's important that we keep a focus on creating resources around that as well, right? So that people have something to go to in that phase.
Super interesting point, actually. And you were bringing up these points in our breakout room. I'm forgetting that not everybody was in our breakout room, where we talked about, you've been looking very closely at PIX in Brazil and seeing what has created impact. And there's that moment of going, maybe open source isn't just code, but maybe it's open knowledge. And it's thinking about how do we bring the knowledge of what's working and what isn't working into what is possible elsewhere is part of what you do, Elizabeth, with that research that you do. It's also, I guess, thinking about what are the impact metrics and what is good service design and how do we help with capacity strengthening through that journey as people grow from I've just got started to now I actually need volumes, and that means that we've got some hard work to do. That's a really good point. Paula, you've made a good point in here. Do you want to jump on the camera and talk? Paula,
Hi, everyone.
Yes. Hi, Paula.
Thank you for bringing it up. Just to add for those who are not familiar yet with the concept, but Africanenda is this institution which essentially is a hub of experts that have built different projects in Africa. So know the space, know the continent, know the different elements that goes into building an IIPS. And they're coming in, the official launch is only in a few days, and they're coming in precisely to sort of help fill that gap, as many of you have said on the chat and in your overviews. It really requires making good decisions in the space, really requires having nuanced knowledge on what are the elements that go into designing a good scheme and making good operational decisions and so on. And so Africanenda will be this element that will come in and help project owners at no cost to project owners, sort of an advisement for their decision making. Thank you for calling it out, Leslie.
I think it's a really interesting organization. Africanenda is going to add some incredible value to the ecosystem as we go. I'm sure of it. Actually, we had Robert, the CEO, here earlier on in the day. Robert, are you still here? I don't know if he is.
In fact, Leslie Ann, when we check that if Robert is here, we already have had a couple of weeks ago a meeting with Robert and Sabine and all that, because I think it's what this panel is about, about these partnerships. We saw the two Stevens before, from the regulator and how he has contributed in developing some of the content of the course that David was leading. Also, Steve and Modus Books that have done an incredible job in terms of enriching the content of the course that we have on technology and bringing new perspective, experts, speakers. So the relationship that we have also with other organizations. We haven't talked about it, but in the business track, we rely a lot on the work and the research that CGAP has done in this space. And I don't know if they are here today, but Will Cook, Soraya, there are many people at CGAP that has been also contributing. And obviously also Elizabeth, Glenbrook, that also has been contributing on that. And I think that's the interesting thing that we are talking about, building community, inside Mujalu, but in more general, also in the space of people that is really interested in making payment systems more inclusive. So I think that's what we are trying to achieve. And I'm so glad to see all these names and all these people participating today in this conference.
There's a lot of love, and actually that center of community build, exactly this. So I am really excited as well to see. I think there's a nice tipping point building of a balance of business operations and tech that is going on in the industry, which is great. Anyone else interested to learn more from the panelists about what they do, or to learn more about anything we've talked about, or to make a point of any kind? Feel free to step into the conversation. I'm watching my second monitor to see if anyone is around. I don't see any more chat comments at this point in time. So I wonder if we kind of draw to a close at that point. Hopefully in other community events like this, we'll be able to focus on lots of different partners over time. I really wanted to focus on some of our really strong, close partners that are part of the family of Level 1 principles, and we will lead to more.